And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Seaports have been the centers of commerce for centuries, and they remain crucial to the economy today. Every year, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of products move through ports. On today's Open Connection, we bring you this story from 1991.
The Port of Prince Rupert saw the development of its coal and grain handling facilities and the building of the recently expanded Fairview Terminal. Kitimat, on the other hand, has been unsuccessful in opening its port to handle general cargo or ferry traffic. Currently, the port has 3 private terminals at Alcan, Uracan, and Ocelot, and also freight and container capability at the Rivtow dock. Last summer, a major terminal operator was willing to build another dock in Kitimat based on a marketing study. Then the province announced it would finance a much broader project, one that included everything that Kitimat had ever hoped for in port expansion. Kitimat's mayor believes the expanded plan can have advantages, not just for Kitimat, but the whole of the Northwest.
The largest advantage will be to the shippers, the exporters, and the importers in due course, and that will be because of the reduced transportation costs, at least for road transportation costs, because Kitimat is 100 miles closer round trip to Tidewater than Prince Rupert is, for example. So I think the largest benefit will be to the shippers in the area, and that will permit them to stay in business in downtimes like we are going through right now, so that they will be able to still ship their product without having to pay exorbitant transportation costs.
A Kitimat Terrace Port Committee was set up to oversee the necessary studies. Recently, it's been incorporated into a society that will function as the port project's proponent until legislation that will implement a new ports policy for British Columbia is passed in the legislature.
The Port Society will exist until legislation is passed in government for the adoption of the provincial port policy. When the provincial port policy is passed, a community port authority will be formed.
And there's far more to the proposal than just new marine facilities in Kitimat.
The official mandate under the prospectus includes the development of foreshore lands in Douglas Channel, the development of the Terrace Kitimat Airport and the Kitimat Air Park, and the development of the marine terminal.
There could be significant gains for the Kitimat Terrace area.
The prospectus provides us with a lot of information that a lot of people have needed to be confirmed. There's hard data in the prospectus that shows the viability of port construction in Kitimat. We need to do some work on upgrading the infrastructure for the port site, but the business details and the potential development for business in this area is included in the prospectus. It's very encouraging.
The Mayor of Terrace has been involved from the start, and his community supports the initiative.
You know, we're a community that depends a lot on transportation links, and of course we're situated in a very appropriate spot for that. We have the connection through Highway 16 east to west, and we have the connection of Highway 37 north to south. So we see the port in Kitimat as an extension of the transportation system, and a way for some of our products to come down to the seashore and on down to the other lands across the Pacific. So we're very encouraged to see that Kitimat is trying extremely hard to obtain this port facility, and we support them all the way.
The port prospectus does indicate there will be diversion of lumber cargoes from Prince Rupert to Kitimat in the short term, but in the long run, other cargoes will be more important.
I think in the short term, the Kitimat terminal can certainly survive, and that will be on basically lumber products. and that was clearly identified in the prospectus. There would be some 300,000 tons initially that would be shipped through Kitimat. And I think that if it's not the copper smelter, for example, that is built in this region, it may be something else that is built in the region. There is also the possibility of ore concentrates coming through Kitimat, because there are various developments either north of Terrace or east of Terrace where those people plan to ship their ore concentrates, whether it's copper or whatever the ore happens to be. And that, I think, puts Kitimat in a good position to be able to try and access some of that product.
And this view of things was supported by the director of a company which is shopping for a suitable port in British Columbia through which to ship ore concentrates.
I think Price Waterhouse, as they usually do, made an excellent estimate of the tonnage that might come through the port of Kitimat if it's built. But I think they really did underestimate seriously the amount of mining industry concentrate that is seeking a new port outlet in BC. And the reason for this is that the Port of Vancouver is getting terribly congested. Longer-term contracts have been made with some of the existing terminals, and now the mining industry has to look around and see what other possible ports to serve the mining industry are available. Vancouver's full. Kitimat's a possibility, a very real possibility. We need a second mining industry concentrate terminal. It could be Kitimat.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. When it comes to big budget construction projects, few beat the scale and the scope of major shipping port developments. Let us return to the archives with then Kitimat Mayor Rick Woolsey.
The project cost is some $63 million. It is not proposed that the government pay $63 million. What is proposed, however, is that the BC government provide infrastructure of some $24 million. And that would be to create the navigation channel, which is the 2 berths. It would also be to create the landfill and the slope protection, as well as the causeway and the harbor road and the rail access. All the other development of the terminal would be done by a terminal operator, not by the government.
Although the Prince Rupert City Council and the Prince Rupert Port Corporation have opposed the project from the start, the gloves really came off at the Kitimat information meeting. Residents reacted strongly to a letter read on behalf of Mayor Peter Lester, claiming the whole scheme is a ploy to ensure the re-election of Skeena MLA and Crown Lands Minister Dave Parker at the next provincial vote.
I know how diligently the minister has worked, defying skeptics as well as economics. I sincerely hope that Mr. Parker will be re-elected as a direct result of his efforts, and I am confident that Premier Harcourt will appoint him to the cabinet. I was impressed by this imaginative prospectus, but I should point out that if the intention were to have been to induce financial investment instead of a political mirage, even Michael Milken, in his heyday, would have difficulty unloading junk bonds paying 25% interest.
Lester also claims the proposed port won't be economically viable and accused the BC government of taking money from needed services to pay for it.
Robbing dollars from schools and hospitals, I'd like to find out a bit more about the plans, because I could be convinced with the proper explanations that this meets the criteria for a government subsidy.
Even Kitimat's normally even-tempered mayor was annoyed at the tone of the letter.
The letter indicates the sign of cooperation from Prince Rupert to Kitimat. For me, sir, you can tell Mr. Lester that that letter is bloody awful.
And Kitimat residents don't think it's fair that development in their community should be held up for the sake of Prince Rupert.
Now, when a new kid on the block wants to have a few $1 million from the government in a responsible port, you're screaming and crying. and I think it's disgusting. I think you should come on side with us and help us develop the Northwest as a complete area. We have the potential, and we're going to do it whether you're on our side or not.
There were objections from other Prince Rupert companies as well as the Longshore Union.
If your proposal does go ahead, what will happen, there will be 40 jobs that will be transferred from Prince Rupert to Kitimat. But meantime, the provincial government's going to have to spend $25 million to get these jobs. So why should you transfer the jobs?
Kitimat takes the view that it's not a question of when additional shipping capacity will be needed on the north coast, but where. And the community is determined it will be at its port. The verbal sparring match moved into high gear in Terrace.
And that gets me to the Price Waterhouse economic study. Was that government funds?
What do you mean, was it government funds?
Well, was government funds? Was that of that $400,000 you
Yes.
got? Was that some of that directed towards the Price Waterhouse study?
Yes.
Then with mine and your tax dollars, and
Well,
you're
you
claiming
want to talk
it's
about
no,
tax dollars, Paul?
No, you're claiming it's no.
Let's talk about tax dollars, Paul.
I'd have to say that the federal government, I'd have to say
If you want to talk about tax dollars, let's talk about tax dollars. And all you have to do is to send away to Ports Canada, and they will send you an annual report. This one, unfortunately, only goes to December 31, 1989. And we don't have December 31, 1990 yet.
Well, obviously.
However, it's not all bad news, Paul.
No, I know.
And if Kitimat could get $48 million from the taxpayers' back pocket,
right,
we would be just as well off as Prince Rupert.
Well, I think
now, the nice thing about that $48 million loan, so-called, is that if it's not repaid by 2009, it's totally forgivable. Read it in here, Paul.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. A sister or friendship port agreement may also call for the sharing of various information in port infrastructure improvement, commercial facilities development, port operation, and to cooperate for trade vitalization and service improvement. Let us return to the archives to hear community concerns.
There is potential for expansion in Prince Rupert. We expand, however,
There's potential in the Northwest, right?
We expand only when product is identified to justify that potential. A further thing that you seem to be getting quite a lot of mileage out of is confidentiality and studies. I just want to put the record straight with respect to your consultant studies. We have shared all information with the provinces and your consultants with respect to the work they did on the Kitimat terminal, including marketing studies. I find it quite remarkable that you feel that the information that has been developed as a result of this information is somehow confidential. Thank you very much.
At this stage, it doesn't look as if there can be cooperation between the two communities, or even any way Prince Rupert will cease trying to stop the project. Kitimat's mayor wishes it were different.
And from my perspective, I think that the whole region will benefit over the long term, and that is if both Prince Rupert and Kitimat work together to get more and more product moving through the North Coast ports. And I think that opportunity is there now, and it will be there in the future as well, because as I've said before, I think it's better for British Columbia and our North Coast region as a whole if we're able to have the product shipped through our territory as opposed to having it shipped through the Lower Mainland, or worse, through the ports in the States, Seattle or Portland or whatever it happens to be.
There could be another reason the Port of Prince Rupert is worried about competition from Kitimat, however. The proposal is for the new facilities to be under the jurisdiction of a local port corporation, not a federally governed agency like the Prince Rupert Port.
Well, Prince Rupert has a good port corporation. I don't want to knock the fine people up there, but it is always nice to deal with local people. And if all other things are equal, if you're dealing on the one hand with an agency which must in the end go to Ottawa for final decisions, as opposed to another agency which is dealing with local citizens, it's always much easier to deal locally.
Do you think it might be easier to tailor requirements to specific companies for handling their products?
Well, there's always a certain amount of appeal in starting from scratch with a new terminal, because then you have an opportunity to put in the sort of environmental controls which are so necessary these days. It's always attractive to be able to put in your own particular type of handling equipment. Whereas if you go into an existing operation, it's you that must adapt to what is already there.
Residents have till April 12th to express their opinion about the port proposal. By mid-May, it should be known whether the project gets approval in principle, needs more study, or is rejected. And it would require a very streamlined process to meet the needs of this company.
Well, here's the rub. If we can maintain our schedule, we would like to be shipping concentrate late in 1992.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Before the stock market crash of 1929, Stewart was a boomtown of more than 10,000 people. It was the base for those working in enormous and fabulously rich Premier Gold and Silver Mine, the Big Missouri Mine, and the Riverside Mine. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to hear from Stewart business owners from 1991.
How is business right now?
It's terrible. Just it's less than half of what it was a year ago. My staff is down to 1 part-time from 3 full-time, part-time employees a year ago. It's just very difficult trying to keep it all together.
Stewart is a mining community, which means when a mine there is open and the world market is up, things are good. But instability is the problem with mining. Things aren't always good.
I don't see it getting any better or any easier. I feel very pessimistic right now. I don't feel comfortable because there are not that many options on the horizon. And there have been options in the past.
Gary Hubbard is going into his 17th year of business as the owner of Hub's Pharmacy. He's a bit more optimistic about the town's economy. Hubbard says the last 5 or 6 years have been better than ever since the tourism, mining, and forestry bases have all been expanding. But he won't try and kid anyone by saying business right now is good.
Well, right now business is actually quite slow, but not unusually for this time of year. Usually January, February are slow months anyway. I think people are holding back a bit because of the pending Westman layoff, but the logging industry is up to full tilt right now. In fact, I don't think there's a trucker in town that's not working.
Is it frustrating having a business in a place where the economy fluctuates so much?
Well, it's not quite as easy to run. Coming from an area like Quesnel, which is where I came from, was very, very stable. You take what you did last year, you add a few, add a bit to it and change the percentages, and you can almost order the same things. Maybe not exactly the same quantities, but different merchandise, but the same percentages. Where here it can vary very widely.
Well, Bill, are you finding anything?
Well, it looks like there is something here, Ian.
Ian McLeod is another local businessman. He was born in Stewart and has owned the town's hotel since 1952 when he built it. He also recognizes the current slump the economy has taken.
Well, it's pretty shaky. A lot of the businesses are hurting. A lot of people have had to leave town. There's a lot of empty houses here again, and at the moment, I don't see very much on the horizon.
At least not on the immediate horizon. But the business people of Stewart aren't really as disheartened as they sound, because Stewart's been like this for years, and they know when there's a bust, eventually there's got to be another boom.
That's right, that's right. And we've experienced it so many times that we realize that that's what will happen.
Do you think that's what sort of gets you through the tough periods?
Yes, it does. Yes, when you're prepared for it and have had it happen before, you can cope with it far better than having never experienced it.
It's the experience of living in an unstable economy that allows members of the business community to stand back and analyze the problems. If there was some diversity, a major investment in another industry, things would look different. That other industry is forestry. Orenda Forest Products is planning to construct a zero-effluent pulp mill in northwest BC. Using Finnish technology, it will produce pulp through an environmentally friendly process. The pulp will then be made into a magazine grade of paper. The capacity of the mill has been set so that all of the pulp wood required for its operation can be supplied from the company's own forest license. That license encompasses about a third of the Calam Forest District. Orenda is planning to build the mill inside their license area, about 70 miles outside of Stewart. That plan infuriates many of the local business people. They say the mill should be built inside the town's boundaries because the town is in such need of a company and project of this size.
The Orenda project, the concept is great. I support it 110%. I think it's what the Northwest needs, but I think they have to take a very, very serious look at their location. It is not good for Stewart, and I don't think it's good for the region as a whole in the long term, because you're going to inevitably develop another small community around that major development. And we don't need any more small communities that can't stand on their own 2 feet. We need to stabilize the communities we have.
The Orenda pulp mill is supposed to be built 60 miles from here. Well, in this type of terrain, I just can't see how people could commute that far, especially in the winter months. So I really don't see an awful lot of benefit to the community from that project if it goes at that site 60 miles from town.
Orenda has definite reasons for picking the location that they did. One, for example, is that they wanted the mill to be close to where they were logging. That way the trucks could take back roads to the mill without ever having to use the highway. The logs then don't have to be cut down to a standard size for transporting. That's a big money saver. Many of Stewart's business people are glad to get the mill wherever it's built. To them, some economic fall-off is better than none at all.
No, I think, if I could look at it from perhaps a rather selfish point of view, I would say that it would probably benefit me personally more if it was built here. But perhaps it won't be as viable if it was built here. I know they are saying that they want to be closer to their source of supply. I can see that. If they build it out there, they can increase the utilization of the wood source, and that's something we're also looking for. And I think it'll be a much stronger, more viable business if it's built there. And that's what we want. We want a strong, viable business that'll last a long time, not something that's going to be a flash in the pan.
With the location that they are choosing to place their mill, if it's approved, we will benefit as a transportation center for Orenda's mill. We will have supposedly housing and supply the services that the employees would need. Transportation of goods and services to the mill, including incoming goods that they would need in their pulping process, as well as the finished product would be exported through Stewart.
A big concern that's being raised is that a community will spring up around the mill, but Orenda doesn't see that as a very big possibility. They agree that the hour's commute would be tedious, but they plan on providing bus service to the mill so no one will have to drive. They were quick to point out that many people in BC must travel for an hour or more to get to work every day.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.